Apakah bentuk hubungan Malaysia-Filipina 51 tahun selepas penubuhan ASEAN? Bagaimana pula dengan tuntutan Filipina ke atas Sabah? Dan bagaimana kedua negara akan bergerak ke hadapan dalam era Malaysia baru? Bersama dengan Setiausaha Luar Filipina, Cayetano, saya Rizal Zokapli. Ini AWANI Global. Your Excellency, we'll start with the Philippines-Malaysia bilateral relationship, and the relationship between both countries has evolved into many dynamic forms in the past 50 years. We've got trade, we've got cultural, we've got security and disaster relief. What is the new phase of relationship between the Philippines and Malaysia that you foresee moving forward?
Just this afternoon, I had a very, very good meeting with the new foreign minister and got a lot of insights about the reformist nature of this new government. And at the start, in the middle, at the end of the meeting, you know, there was such an excitement and consensus that we can really do much more. The timing is there. Issues that held us back before are at bay. Common interest regarding certain issues we've already been discussing. So we really think that you know, a stronger, closer Philippine-Malaysia, Malaysia-Filipina relationship will benefit both the Filipino people and the Malaysians.
And what are some of these issues or pain areas that you discussed with the new foreign minister, and how do you foresee that moving forward? What kind of actions do you see will solve these issues and pain areas?
We really discussed how to move forward, how to leapfrog, and we discussed a little bit of some sensitive issues that I think held us back in the past.
Security issues, perhaps?
Yes, one of them is security. We discussed, of course, a little bit about the situation of Filipinos in Sabah. We discussed the thankfulness of us in the help of the Malaysians in southern Mindanao, with the MILF. We discussed what went wrong in the former peace talks. For example, is that we had a political solution, but no economic plan. But right now, the timing is well with the Malaysian economy, the Philippine economy, the direction of Prime Minister Mahathir, the direction of President Duterte. So we think that Malaysian conglomerates, Malaysian companies, Malaysian businessmen, you know, can help not only by making money and transferring technology and investing in the Philippines, but can really help in the peace efforts that it will become long and lasting.
Do you foresee more investment going into these areas moving forward?
I think so. I think there will be more Philippine investments to Malaysia, and that there's much more that Malaysia can do. Taking the cue from Prime Minister Mahathir's Putrajaya, which I was much younger then and amazed that you can plan something like that. Mr. Vince Dizon of the BCD, under the direction of President Duterte, is building Clark Air Base, the former U.S. Clark Air Base, into the new Clark City, and MTD Capital bagged I think it's a 1.5, 1.7 billion Malaysian ringgit project. So they're building our government center, our athletic center, our aquatic center, a government housing, and our athletes village, since we're your successors after such a successful Southeast Asian Games here. This is an example of us having a need in our build, and Malaysian companies having the expertise, the technology, and the you know, the audacity, you know, to do something new and put up the standards.
Speaking of solving issues, right? You still haven't enforced the arbitration with China when it comes to the 9-dash line in South China Sea. Will there be any, moving forward, looking at a bigger aspect of that, including ASEAN countries, to also be part of that making it a bit stronger instead of a bilateral, making it a multilateral enforcement of the arbitration that is won, or the Philippines won about 2 years ago?
Well, thank you for that question, because that is precisely the propaganda and the mental dishonesty or intellectual dishonesty of the Philippine opposition to President Duterte and his team. So they said that we're not enforcing the Hague decision or the arbitral decision. That's actually deceiving, because the arbitral award deals with sovereign rights, economic rights. So what did it deal with? First, it defined the features and the entitlements, talked about fisheries, talked about the environment, talked about safety of life at the seas, and talked about living and non-living resources, so that includes oil and gas. So as far as fisheries, we have a tentative fishing agreement with China. So our fishermen are now fishing there, also the Vietnamese fishermen in the Scarborough Shoal, because that's what the arbitration decision said. In the local sense, you know, like if you say, I have a court decision, enforce it, bring the sheriff, bring the police, you know, in that sense, that's where they try to deceive people. That's not being enforced. But there's no enforcement mechanism for the UNCLOS. It is legally binding, but you don't have an international police or anybody except for the UN Security Council, you know, to come up with a binding enforcement mechanism. So just because we're doing it through negotiation doesn't mean that we're not pursuing the gains of the Philippines in the arbitral award. So the funny thing is, the people who failed in that approach is trying to blame the people who are actually succeeding in a new approach.
Will this move moving forward include other countries who are also part of the territorial disputes, including Malaysia?
Yes. Malaysia and the Philippines have also overlapping claims. Malaysia and Philippines is in a unique position of having these experiences with arbitration. So we can actually set an example and also discuss the sensitive issues between us. So, for example, there's so much noise in the Philippines about China being in our exclusive economic zone, which is a valid concern. But there are features in the South China Sea in our EEZ that are occupied by Malaysia. But you see, we're not at each other's throats. Rather, we're finding ways to cooperate and how we can your people and our people, the Malaysians and the Filipinos, can equally benefit from all of this.
So what would you say to the Philippines media saying that the Philippines is sacrificing national interests for economic benefits from China?
First, I'll say totally untrue. Secondly, I'll say that, you know, look at the results. So if I keep shouting at you, Rizal, and you don't give me the reaction I want, then you'll say I'm tough and I'm victorious, because what? I dressed you down and I shouted. But if I ask you nicely and talk to you as a gentleman and you give me what I asked for, so I to the critics, you know, the media is simply, you know, reporting what the critics is saying. So it's not really the media but the critics, you know. So to the critics, what's your objective? Because if your objective is securing our national territory and the Philippines protecting and enjoying our sovereign rights, we're on the right track. This approach is paying off.
Is this still microphone diplomacy in that sense? Or well, is there a lot of
look at the Philippines and Malaysia. Do we shout at each other about the South China Sea? But we're doing things together. So that's what I meant, you know. But what if right here I start saying, you know, Malaysia is wrong, Philippines, then the Malaysian foreign minister does the same in Manila. So pretty soon, we won't be cooperating, our tourism will be affected, our investments will be affected. We live in a global community. And ASEAN, we're brothers and sisters, but we do have large neighbors that are a blessing to us. You have Japan, you have China, you have India, you know. So all of these countries have a big influence on ASEAN. So we really have to live, we find a way to live together as neighbors. But of course, you know, have common, to have an equitable a rule of law for all of us.
The Prime Minister Mahathir has also been very vocal when it comes to issues including the Myanmar, the Rohingyas in Myanmar, and other ASEAN-related issues. And President Rodrigo Duterte has also been very vocal when it comes to expressing his views about certain things.
Yes.
Have they actually shared what, or has President Duterte has actually shared with you what will be discussed with Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir when he comes here in the next few days?
Well, definitely, it's about how we can strengthen the relationship. And definitely, it will also be about security, economic cooperation. Both countries are very busy trying to protect their citizens, the shipment of goods, prevent piracy, not allowing terrorism to take root. We're both busy trying to fight trafficking of people, So I think this is where it'll go. And, President Duterte has looked up to Prime Minister Mahathir from way back. He saw what the Prime Minister did for Malaysia. So I think it'll be an interesting discussion. And President Duterte, having been a mayor of a neighborhood that was very challenged in the past, which is Davao and Mindanao, also would, I think, provide a lot of good insights. And I think where President Ramos and President Mahathir had, when they had very good relation and connections, I think we will take off from that. I think President Duterte will step in, and I think our relationships will even grow. And I think there will be specific areas of cooperation, not just general language or of cooperation.
On that note, will the Philippines still continue to assert claim on Sabah as the 13th state of the Philippines?
When it comes to disputes or claims, it's very difficult for any state, to abandon its stand. So look at the reverse. If the Philippines was a federal government and if the people there voted to be and it was there, I could not just go to your foreign minister and say, can you abandon your claims there? But the commitment to resolve all of these issues peacefully, in a peaceful manner, the commitment not to disturb, the ecology, the environment, the commitment to also make sure our citizens, do not take up arms or use force. In the same manner that we are asking the government, and we got positive response to help us help our people who are there. And I think, if you go to that area, Filipinos and Malaysians and whatever ethnic tribes or groups they have come from, look at each other as brothers and sisters. So the conflict is more in the national psyche, but in the on the ground, people just want to live and make a living and have a better community. So I don't expect us to change each other's stand, but I don't expect this to define our relationship nor disturb our relationship.
So there will be negotiations in the future quietly.
I won't even call it negotiations. I mean, there might be discussions. Just like in the South China Sea, when President Cory Aquino, our president after Marcos, went to see Chairman Deng Xiaoping, Chairman Deng told her, if we can resolve the issues now, let's resolve it. If not, can we put it in the back burner? Can we and maybe our successors will be wiser than us. So if myself and my counterparts and our people in the DFA and your people in MOFA will be wise enough to suggest something to Prime Minister Mahathir and President Duterte that can work and that both want, then why not? But if not, let's leave it there and work on tourism, investments, security issues together.
Speaking of Filipinos in Malaysia, there are about 600,000 Filipinos living in Malaysia, and out of that, about 120,000 to 180,000 are domestic workers. What are some of the main concerns when it comes to protecting the rights of the Filipino workers in Malaysia?
Well, we've been working closely with both Malaysia and Indonesia on that. Many of the Indonesians suffer same issues that we suffer in other countries, not in Malaysia. So here it's more of a peculiar cases, one-on-one rather than a mass dissatisfaction. You know, for example, no, in the Gulf, there are many host countries that are very generous, but the culture sometimes is different. The food is different. The language is different. So sometimes there's difficulties there, and it appears that there's a much bigger segment that's dissatisfied. You know, but here our culture is quite close. You treat our domestic workers as family. Some of the Malaysians even visit the family of their of their nannies. But the issues will be more for case basis. You know, and then of course for us as a country, it's giving better education, better opportunities to our people, and to have more jobs in our country, because the reality is the most vulnerable of migrant workers are the household, because you stay there. But for example, for those who are in the malls, or those who are in the fields, or those who are in the offices, you don't like what you see, your boss is not treating you, you just leave. Not so for a household. So those are some of the issues.
And the Philippines have got about 10 million balikbayans around the world. How do you manage them in a world, in a very globalized world right now? Because I think in a globalized world, we want to learn from the experts as to how you manage when you've got your populations around the world.
That's a very good question. First of all, they're managing us. So for decades, our overseas workers, migrant workers, kept the Philippine economy alive. So now we're trying to leverage technology to be able to reach out, use social media, have a single number, have a call center, having the embassies closer to them, and harnessing relationship with people with Filipino descent. So you might be a grandchild or great-grandchild of someone who was half Filipino.
So you bet on that connection as well.
We're trying, but we'd like them to know that Philippines is still their second home, if not their first home.
And do you foresee the 2019 Southeast Asian Games to be maybe the platform for people to get to know the Philippines even more?
Definitely, because when you talk about discipline, teamwork, sacrifice, winning is not everything. Of course, you want to win, but it's really how you play the game and everything. This all has to do with sports. So what better way to be competitive but bring people together? But through sports,
Hopefully, we see more Southeast Asian heroes that people can relate to.
Yes. We train together, compete against each other, but hopefully more world-class athletes and athletes winning around the world. And in KL, we cheered for the Philippine team. You cheered for the Malaysian team. Back home, it'll be the opposite. You'll be cheering for your team, our team, but we'll be the home. But outside ASEAN, we could be cheering for the fellow ASEAN. In the same way, I won't mention the teams, but in the World Cup, but of course, when there were Asian teams, it was exciting for Asians to see that, we can make our mark in the World Cup.
On a more serious note, you've been known to be an enemy of graft and corruption. And the World Bank has reported that the fight against corruption in ASEAN is very slow, and it's actually taking a toll on its development. So how do we accelerate this? And were these things that you have actually discussed with Datuk Saifuddin, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to maybe look at ASEAN as a whole and look at where we can fight corruption together moving forward?
The Foreign Minister did, in fact, mention, the reformist nature of this government, the fight against corruption, the commonality of the problem of corruption. President Duterte's priority is to fight crimes, drugs, and corruption. But ASEAN has changed over the years. That's why I keep telling our Western friends, where many of these think tanks or banks or NGOs are based, you can't judge us from your eyes. You have to see our own, what's happening here, our own history, and see. So we have made giant strides. For example, I don't want to get involved or comment on local politics, but corruptions have been an issue was an issue in the last election, has been an issue, and we're monitoring the news and seeing something's done. The same thing in the Philippines. I have not joined a single election, and I've been through so many elections where corruption is not an issue. But we've made giant strides, you know, but nature of human beings is that we're corruptible. So we have to fight that, you know, we have to make sure that we can't, we won't succumb to corruption, you know. But rather than just criticizing or judging from your point of view, you know, what are the solutions you propose?
Is there room for the ASEAN countries to fight together?
Yes, definitely. I mean, for example, better connectivity, better media and social media are effective tools against corruption. So that's just an example. We can work together and, you know, because your businessmen come to our country, our businessmen come to our businessmen partner together in another country. So we do have to fight corruption together, but we have to make sure that the fight is not politicized. No difference from human rights. We all believe in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We all believe in humanity. We are spiritual people, although we have different religions. Having said that, if you weaponize or politicize human rights, then you won't be helping. You know, you'll be giving one political group a tool against the group. The group will not respond by doing reforms or by treating the problem. So, you know, whether it's corruption, it's human rights, it's inequity or inclusivity, you know, we have to deal with it in a way that it's not politicized.
On that note, the last one would be on human rights and defending Manila's campaign against illegal drug trade and balancing human rights in that sense in the Philippines. You were very acerbic in defending the Philippines' own internal processes and mechanisms to ensure that the human rights of all our people are protected and respected, end quote. And you said, and I quote, "We do not need others who think they know better than us Filipinos to tell us what to do." And share with us these thoughts behind this very strong sentiment.
Okay. I'll give you an example. Last year, Iceland, the foreign minister of Iceland led other countries in the Human Rights Council in Geneva in criticizing the Philippines. So what I did, instead of also criticizing them or pointing out their own weaknesses in human rights, and no one's perfect, so each one has that weakness, I asked for a bilateral meeting and sat down with him. A very good meeting, very nice guy. They had an incredible, intelligent delegation. But what I told him is this. I said, "Sir, you know, come to the Philippines. Don't take my word for it. Look whether it's really a campaign to destroy human rights, or is it a campaign to protect everyone's human rights. See whether we're you know, shooting people at the back and you know, executing them extrajudicially in a sense that's murder, or see if we're just enforcing the law just like the West would, you know." He did not come. They did not send a delegation. Then the next year they're going to criticize us again. So that was the context of my statement, you know, that we're all responsible to each other. It's a global community. Interdependence, yes, but dependence, no. So I'm not going to be dependent, and we should not be dependent on other countries telling us our human rights record. Now, if you do want to help, you know, come, look, discuss, give us solutions, tells us where the problem is. I have sat down also with EU representatives, and I've told them, tell me specific cases where it was murder, where it was extrajudicial, where it was the government ordering this, you know, and I'll do something about it. You know, and if I see that that's true, you know, I'll have a heart-to-heart talk with the people, even the president. But the problem is, some of these countries have the best intelligence communities in the world, but when they do reports in public, it's based on open source or newspapers, which again is politicized. You know, so last point is that it's context. So, of course, our president speaks much less politically correct than the gentleman from Washington or from Europe, you know. But our president is not speaking to the bankers. He's not speaking to the diplomats. He's not speaking to the professors. He's not speaking to the priests and nuns when he talks this way. He's speaking to the criminals. And that's the language they understand. And the kind of drugs used in Europe and the US is different from the kinds of drugs used in the Philippines. Imagine there's this UN special rapporteur saying that drugs doesn't cause doesn't lead to paranoia and to violence. When an UNDA report itself, quoted many scientific sources saying that methamphetamines, or in the Philippines we call shabu, leads, to violence and also to, to people not being in their right mind, just the layman's term. So my message really is, we're responsible. We believe in human rights. We believe in the Universal Declaration. But, don't mouth it just so that you can gain points, raise money, use us as a platform for your own politics back home. Mm-hmm. Say it and do something about it because you care about people. And if you care about people, work with us, not against us.
On that note, we thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us. Thank you. Thank you.